There's something haunting about the quiet that follows a departure. You might feel it in the corners of your day, a pause that used to be filled with her voice, a glance you expected to catch, but what you don't always see is how deeply she feels your absence too. This video isn't about bitterness. It's not about playing games or fueling illusions of superiority. It's about something more enduring. The silent pull that happens when two people part, and only one pretends they don't feel the echo. Because whether she says it aloud or not, she feels the void more than you know. If this resonates, if you've ever had to walk away with strength, or stayed silent when it hurt, then let this be your companion tonight. Take a breath, settle in, and if you find something here that speaks to you, consider subscribing to the everlasting Stoic. There's wisdom in stillness, there's power in presence, and sometimes there's healing in being reminded of your own worth. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Memories echo louder in silence. You would think that absence is a quiet thing, but it's not. It's loud, unbearably loud, when it starts echoing through the places she once moved freely, through the small rituals of her day. The forgotten coffee mug on the shelf, the song that plays at the wrong moment, the scent on a sweater she didn't realize you wore often. That's when the void starts speaking. What she won't tell you, what pride or fear or confusion will keep locked behind her lips, is that every memory she made with you now roams untethered, and in the silence they come back louder than ever. A woman might seem composed on the outside, even radiant. She might post her smiles and surround herself with noise, but it is in her solitude, in the gentle hush of late hours, that she remembers. Not just moments, but how they made her feel. The way your eyes lingered when you weren't trying to impress her. The weight of your calm when the world around her spun too fast. The way your presence quieted her storms without you even knowing they were raging. Memory is a cruel tutor when it arrives late, especially when what was shared wasn't ordinary. Because here's the truth. When something meaningful ends, both people carry its residue, even if only one is brave enough to admit it. She remembers the small acts, the unseen kindnesses, the steady reliability that didn't beg for attention. And the more silent the world becomes without you, the more those memories stretch, filling the empty space with an ache too dignified to name. But here's the twist. She might not even realize what she's missing at first. Because when distance begins, many convince themselves it's relief. Freedom. Space. They say things like, "I need time to think," or "It's better this way." And for a while they believe it. They believe it because they have to. Because the pain of separation is masked by the adrenaline of independence. But as that rush fades, something quieter sets in. And this is where Stoicism serves us, in observing that emotion without being consumed by it. You, if you're wise, have already learned to sit with silence. She, perhaps, is just now beginning to hear its voice. She doesn't text. She doesn't reach out. But she thinks. Oh, she thinks. And thought, when mixed with longing, becomes a powerful force. It rewrites the narrative. It forces her to replay conversations, to reimagine the things she brushed off. Maybe he was right. Maybe I misjudged that moment. Maybe I expected too much without realizing what I was given. But you must resist the temptation to let that knowledge feed your ego. This is not about triumph. It is about understanding. She feels the void because you left something behind. Not chaos, not neediness, but peace, stability, presence. And those qualities don't create noise, they create contrast. When gone, they expose the emptiness of all that remains. And when a woman finally sits with that emptiness, not just for a day, but for many, it begins to press into her, not with violence, but with a soft, persistent ache. An ache that says, he wasn't loud, but he mattered. And that realization doesn't always lead to a message or a reunion. Often, it leads to silence. But silence with weight. Silence with reflection. Silence that carves deeper than words. If you've ever wondered whether she still thinks of you, the answer lies not in her actions but in her stillness. Has she stopped reaching for noise? Has she begun to look inward? That is when you'll know. The memory has returned, and it is speaking. The Stoics teach us not to seek validation in others, but to build a self so grounded that even absence becomes a testimony to our presence. And this is one of those moments where your restraint, your dignity, your discipline become the very things that echo the loudest in her silence. So do not rush to remind her. Do not break the silence just to satisfy curiosity. Let the echo do the work. Let the quiet draw the shape of your worth in her thoughts. And when you feel tempted to act, ask yourself, is it from strength or from fear? Let her sit with the quiet. Let her learn what you were made of. Let the memories speak louder than any message ever could. If you've ever felt that echo yourself, that moment where someone's absence was louder than their presence ever was, share it below. Your story might help someone realize they're not alone in that silence. Chapter 2: The Spiral of Regret. Regret doesn't arrive with a bang. It doesn't knock on the door wearing bold colors or waving red flags. It drips, like a slow, quiet leak behind a wall, unseen at first, ignored, rationalized. But in time it seeps through everything, and once it finds a crack, it never stops. She won't admit she's spiraling. She might not even know it herself, because the spiral of regret is deceiving. It begins as a whisper, dressed as curiosity. I wonder what he's doing. I wonder if he's moved on. Just small thoughts, harmless at first glance. But they grow. Soon, they gather weight. I wonder if I was too harsh. I wonder if I misunderstood his silence. I wonder if he was right, and I was too proud to hear it. And that's when the descent truly begins. You see, when someone walks away from something stable, something calm, something rooted in quiet strength, it feels like empowerment for a while. The world tells us to chase what excites, what burns, what distracts. And she might have listened. She might have stepped away thinking she'd find more. But the more she chases, the more she finds imitation. Men who mirror confidence, but are hollow inside. Moments that seem thrilling, but collapse when touched. And in contrast to that emptiness, your presence takes on a new clarity. You, who once felt like an anchor, now feel like a rarity. Regret creeps in through contrast. It's not just that she misses you, it's that nothing she finds quite replaces the emotional texture you brought. The safety, the depth, the warmth that asked for nothing but gave everything. And when regret finds her, it doesn't shout. It shows her flashes, quiet ones. The way you didn't react when she pushed. The way you smiled when you could have judged. The patience. The restraint. The way you kept your peace. Not because you didn't care, but because you did, deeply. She begins to see the moments she dismissed, the value she misread, and she realizes it wasn't weakness. It was strength, but the kind that doesn't beg to be seen. Now, here's the catch. Regret doesn't always look like sadness. Often, it wears the mask of irritability, or silence, or distraction. She might throw herself into her work, into a new romance, into late nights filled with noise, because facing regret directly would mean admitting she miscalculated, that she turned her back on something genuine. And for many, that truth cuts too deep. So she spins around and around, thinking, reassessing, holding back the urge to reach out. Not because she doesn't feel it, but because pride still has its grip. You may think she's forgotten, that she's cold, detached, unmoved. But the spiral is quiet. It doesn't beg for witnesses. It works behind closed doors, in dimly lit rooms, in early mornings when the world hasn't yet distracted her from herself. And what does that mean for you? It means patience. It means discipline. It means not mistaking her silence for closure. Because while she spirals, you must rise. You must become even more of what you were when she let go. Not for her return, but for your own becoming. Let the spiral do its work. Let it deepen. Let it unravel her illusions. If she finds her way back, it should not be to a man waiting. It should be to a man becoming. A man who needed no return to validate his worth. A man who used her absence as fuel, not grief. That is the Stoic path. That is the power in stillness. Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever been the one who spiraled? Have you ever realized too late that what you left behind was irreplaceable? If so, you understand the weight she now carries. Feel free to share your own reflection below. There's a kind of healing in giving voice to past missteps. Chapter 3. When you're one of a kind, not every connection is replaceable. Not every presence can be mimicked. And deep down, she knows this. She may deny it. She may downplay it. But she knows. Because when you're one of a kind, your absence isn't just a gap. It's a complete shift in the emotional climate of her life. She may meet others. She may even fall into new patterns, new flirtations, new distractions. But in the stillness between moments, when she's driving alone, when she's lying in bed just before sleep, when the noise fades, she feels it. That aching space where your energy used to be. Being one of a kind isn't about perfection. It's not about always saying the right thing or never showing flaws. It's about emotional rarity. The way you listened without trying to fix. The way you challenged her without belittling. The way you stayed when it was easier to leave but left when it was harder to stay. That is not something she stumbles upon again. And when a man shows up with depth, calm, and clarity, when he walks through life like a mountain rather than a firecracker, his memory leaves a trace on the soul. Not because he made noise, but because he made sense. She starts to notice that other men don't. They might look the part, dress the part, say the right lines, but the energy doesn't match. The eyes don't hold the same patience. The words don't land with the same gravity. The warmth is conditional. The presence distracted. The intentions unrooted. And so she remembers the way you didn't have to advertise your value. It was evident in your actions. The way you could hold space for her storms without trying to outshine them. The way your silence was comforting, not punishing. She remembers how you made her feel. Not excited, but safe. Not impressed, but seen. Because here's what most forget. In a world chasing instant gratification, being one of a kind doesn't mean being flashy. It means being unshakable. And unshakable men don't vanish from memory. Even if she never says a word, even if pride builds a dam between the past and present, the memory of you sits like a calm lake in her mind, untouched perhaps, but impossible to ignore. And when life grows loud again, when she's disappointed, overlooked, rushed, she remembers what it was like to be held in the eye of your stormless presence, to be met with calm, not chaos, with intention, not impulse. But do not let that knowledge trap you in nostalgia. Being one of a kind doesn't mean waiting to be missed. It means continuing to evolve, so that even if they return, they find a version of you they barely recognize, not because you've changed who you are, but because you've deepened it. Let her remember. Let her compare. Let her come to her own realization. And whether she voices it or not, she will know she had something rare. And rare things do not beg to be reclaimed. They are either cherished or lost. If you've ever had someone look back and say, "I didn't realize what I had," you know this feeling. Share it in the comments, not for attention but for understanding. Sometimes our past is someone else's lesson. Chapter 4. The pain she hides. She may smile. She may laugh. She may carry herself with elegance and composure, as if nothing ever touched her deeply. And yet, beneath that surface, something quietly trembles. Not always, but often enough to catch her off guard. Because when something real is lost, the ache doesn't vanish, it simply goes underground. The pain she hides is subtle. It doesn't demand attention. It moves like a shadow behind her movements, not always visible, but always there. It slips into the way she pauses before replying, into the sudden silence when a certain song comes on, into the way she stares at a message draft she never sends. People assume she is fine because she looks it, because she functions, because she laughs at jokes and keeps up with conversations. But functioning isn't healing. Smiling isn't forgetting. And if you knew her well, truly well, you would recognize the difference between her joy and her distraction. You see, it's easy to assume that the one who left with confidence is the one who hurts less. That the one who didn't fight, didn't cry, didn't plead, somehow won. But pain isn't loud for everyone. For some, pain becomes performance, a quiet act of survival. And women, especially, are often taught to hold their sorrow with grace, to be proud, to endure, to move forward. But that doesn't mean she doesn't feel it. In fact, the more composed she appears, the more likely she is to be haunted by the moments she can't speak of. Because it's not the dramatic fights or the emotional breakdowns that linger. It's the quiet, intimate things. The way you reached for her hand without asking, the look in your eyes when you didn't know she was watching. The way you listened, truly listened, when she spoke about the parts of herself she rarely shared. Those are the memories that wound. And when she's alone, those moments replay. Not because she wants to suffer, but because those echoes are proof that something real once lived between you. Something fragile, something sacred, something too rare to forget. She hides her pain because revealing it would mean confessing she was wrong, that she let go of something that mattered, that she misjudged a presence that never asked to be proven. In pride, her old companion whispers that vulnerability is weakness. So she hides it, beneath distractions, beneath new faces, beneath late nights and open tabs and scrolls through social media that leave her feeling emptier than before. You may think she's forgotten you, that you were just a phase, a chapter, a lesson. But in truth, you were a presence she hasn't been able to replace. Not because she hasn't tried, but because she's starting to realize that depth is not common, that your type of calm isn't easily found. That peace in a man is not something she can manufacture in another. And this realization doesn't always come with tears. It comes with quiet, with stillness, with the dull ache of knowing that she let something real slip through her fingers. But remember this, her pain is not your responsibility. You gave what you could. You showed up. You stayed grounded. If she let go, it was her path to choose. And your path now is to grow, not to hover at the edge of her story, hoping to be written back in. Still, it's human to wonder, to hope, to reflect. And if you ever questioned whether she felt the loss, know that she did. And she still does. If you've ever carried pain you couldn't show, pain buried beneath your best face, you're not alone. Share that feeling below. Let others know that silent suffering doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it means depth. Chapter 5. Unavailability heightens desire. The paradox is ancient. What is scarce becomes sacred. What is always there becomes taken for granted. And nothing reveals this more than distance. Emotional, physical, spiritual. When you become unavailable, not from malice but from mastery, you become magnetic. She may not have noticed the power of your presence while you were near. In the day-to-day, even a rare soul can begin to feel ordinary. Because when something good is consistent, it risks becoming background noise, soft, dependable, almost invisible, until it's gone. And then desire awakens. This is not manipulation. This is human nature, deeply wired, deeply consistent. We crave what we cannot touch. We think about what we no longer control. And when someone who once offered warmth, patience, and presence withdraws into their own becoming, something shifts, especially if that someone does it with grace. No bitterness, no drama, no need to prove anything. That kind of unavailability doesn't just trigger curiosity. It triggers reflection. It asks a quiet question. Why did he stop showing up for me? And that question grows. It becomes a mirror. It begins to haunt the quiet spaces of her day. You see, when you detach with dignity, when your absence is not a punishment, but a progression, it leaves a mark. It makes her wonder not just where you went, but who you're becoming. And in that wondering, desire returns. Because now, you're no longer accessible. You're not waiting. You're not orbiting. You're on a path. You've reclaimed your time, your energy, your focus. You've stepped into that quiet, stoic discipline that doesn't need to announce its strength. It radiates it. And that energy, that calm, detached focus, it's irresistible, especially to someone who knew what it felt like to be close to it, and then lost it. But make no mistake, if your unavailability is a performance, it will collapse. If it's a strategy, it will expose itself. It only works when it is real, when you are truly invested in yourself, not as a means to draw her back, but as a mission to build the kind of man who is no longer defined by anyone else's attention. When she feels that shift, when she senses that you've stopped orbiting and started evolving, her desire intensifies, not always in action, but in thought, in dreams, in comparison. Every new interaction she has is filtered through the memory of you. and it becomes clearer. Nothing quite feels the same. But this isn't about waiting for her desire. It's about recognizing the truth of value. That when something is rare, it is remembered. That when something stops being available, it starts being craved. And if she reaches out again, if her voice returns to your life, it is not for you to prove your worth. It is for her to earn the right to be near it again. Remain scarce, but not spiteful. Remain focused, not frozen. Let your unavailability be a reflection of your inner abundance, not your emptiness. And remember, desire born from absence fades quickly unless it's met with substance. So continue becoming that substance. Let your growth outpace her longing. Let your silence speak volume. Have you ever felt someone's desire rise after your departure? Have you ever witnessed how space reveals truth? Tell your story below. It may give someone else the courage to step back and reclaim their value. Chapter 6. Standards become a mirror. A woman may resist you. She may walk away. She may claim she needed something different, more exciting or less complicated. But time has a way of testing these stories, and sooner or later, she's forced to confront a truth few people are ready to face. Your standards didn't push her away, they simply reflected her readiness. Because when you stand firm in your values, in your principles, in your expectations of behavior and respect, you become a mirror, not just to her, but to anyone around you. And mirrors, when held up to those who are not yet prepared to see clearly, can feel threatening. You did not demand perfection, but you did demand presence. You did not require submission, but you required clarity, intention, alignment. And in a world where many are still learning how to show up for themselves, asking them to show up for someone else in that same spirit is often too much. And so, she projected, said you were cold, too intense, too disciplined, that you were too serious or emotionally unavailable. When the truth, and you knew this, is that you were simply unwilling to lower your standards just to maintain proximity. She might have called you stoic like it was a flaw. But real stoicism, as you know, isn't about being unfeeling. It's about feeling everything and still choosing discipline over chaos. That energy, that boundary, it unsettles people who aren't used to being met with structure instead of indulgence. You see, your standards weren't rules written in stone. They were quiet expectations born of self-respect. You didn't demand loyalty, you expected it. Naturally. You didn't impose honesty, you created a space where less felt wrong. You didn't beg for peace, you embodied it. And anything that disturbed that became incompatible. And here's where it gets hard for her. Because when you finally walk away, when you remove that mirror, she no longer has anything reflecting her inconsistencies. And in that absence, growth either begins or delusion deepens. But over time, real reflection tends to win. Slowly, she begins to realize that what she once labeled as strict was actually secure. What she called distant was simply composed. What she once felt was too much was exactly what she needed, but wasn't ready to honor. And then comes the reckoning. The quiet thought that perhaps, just perhaps, you weren't being difficult. You were being deliberate. Perhaps it wasn't that you asked for too much, but that she had grown used to giving too little. That kind of realization doesn't hit all at once. It sinks in, subtly, painfully. Usually when someone new enters her life and demands nothing. When she finds herself with a man who is easy to please because he lacks direction. When she realizes that easy does not mean peaceful. And chaos is not the only alternative to boredom. She sees you again, not physically perhaps, but energetically. She remembers how safe she felt when she didn't even realize safety was what she needed. She sees your stillness reflected in the emptiness of others, and by then, you've probably grown further. You've likely raised your standards again. Not as a test to others, but as a reward to yourself, because the Stoic path does not bend for convenience. It holds firm, like stone in a storm. This chapter isn't about gloating. It's about recognizing that when your standards are honest, when they are born not of ego but of deep personal vision, they become a filter. The right people will meet them. The wrong ones will call them unfair. And those in between will remember them long after you're gone. So let them, let her. If you've ever held the mirror of your standards and watched someone walk away from it, tell us what happened. Sometimes the story of your discipline helps someone else stay true to theirs. Chapter 7. Doubt replaces ego. There comes a moment, rarely discussed, quietly lived, when the ego that once shielded her begins to fracture. When the phrases that once protected her from vulnerability, "He wasn't the one," "I deserve better," "I'm fine on my own," begin to feel hollow. And into that hollowness, doubt begins to pour. Not immediately. Doubt is patient. It doesn't force itself in. It waits for the cracks. And eventually, when the bravado tires and the noise dies down, it enters. At first, it's subtle. She hears your name and doesn't scoff like she used to. Someone mentions a trait you had. Your patience, your way with words, your silence that never felt punishing. And her chest tightens, just a little. The ego resists. It's nothing, it says. But her body knows better. You see, ego is loud. It builds fortresses. It writes narratives to protect us from the pain of being wrong. But doubt is quiet. Doubt slips beneath the story and whispers, "What if you misread him? What if he was the one who actually saw you? What if the love he gave was exactly what you needed, but weren't ready to receive?" These thoughts don't come with clarity. They come with discomfort. Because they aren't just about you. They're about her. About the realization that perhaps she wasn't as self-aware as she thought. That maybe her defense mechanisms disguised themselves as independence. That perhaps she didn't lose control. She lost connection. And once the ego is questioned, it cannot easily recover. It limps, it tries to rebuild. She might throw herself into something new, a distraction, a validation loop, but it doesn't land the same way. Because once you've felt real presence, real care, real grounded masculinity, shallow praise starts to feel cheap. This is when she begins to shift. Not in a way you'll always see. She might never tell you. She might never show up in your inbox, voice cracking with apology. But the shift is real. The ego that once kept her distant has now been compromised. And in its place, doubt settles in like fog. Not destructive, not cruel, just honest. And honesty, while painful, is the first step toward growth. She thinks of the way you walked. Slow, certain. The way you listened more than you spoke. The way you left, not in anger, but with a quiet dignity that she now realizes was strength, not weakness. And the more she compares, the clearer it becomes. The man she once couldn't fully receive was the very man who offered her a reflection of her best self, but she wasn't ready to see it. Now, in hindsight, the silence becomes sacred. Your boundaries become noble. Your restraint becomes proof that you didn't act from ego. You acted from alignment. And the irony is, now that her ego has softened, it's too late to meet you where you once were. You've likely changed. You've moved forward. And what she's now searching for is a memory of a man who no longer exists in the same form. Because you didn't freeze in the past, you evolved. This is the hardest lesson of all. That doubt often arrives too late to be useful. That realization without access is a burden. And the ones who once dismissed you now carry a silent longing, not always for reconnection, but for resolution. But you owe no resolution. Your job was never to teach her through pain. It was to honor yourself through truth. Let her doubt what she once defended. Let her question what she once dismissed. Let her grow in silence, in her own time, on her own path. And you, keep becoming the kind of man who evokes this doubt, not by playing games, not by withholding affection, but by living with such depth, such calm, such clarity, that your absence becomes a mirror far more powerful than your presence ever was. If you've ever been the one who left, and years later they returned, not for romance, but for closure, you know this feeling. Share it below, if you feel called to. These moments of quiet doubt, they speak to more people than you realize. Chapter 8. The impact you leave behind. You may not see the full imprint of your presence while you're in her life. People rarely recognize the shape of something until it is removed. But once you're gone, once your energy is no longer saturating the space, your impact begins to unfold in silence. And sometimes, that echo lasts longer than the relationship itself. You see, a man of depth doesn't leave behind a gap. He leaves behind a gravitational field. It doesn't pull with desperation, but with memory, with weight, with resonance. And in the aftermath, long after the final conversation and the last glance, she begins to feel that pull. Not as a plea, but as a reminder. At first, it feels like confusion. Why does something feel off? She wonders. The days move forward, but something's missing. It's not the physical routine. It's the atmosphere, the subtle stability that once surrounded her when you were near, the knowledge, perhaps unspoken, that someone grounded was holding space for her life, without seeking to control it. She didn't realize how much lighter she felt under your calm, how much safer she was with your steady rhythm beside her chaos. And now that you're no longer around, the contrast grows. Your impact isn't always marked by memories of dramatic declarations or romantic highlights. More often, it's found in the quiet corners of the day, when no one else quite understands her the way you did, when no one else responds with patience instead of ego, when no one else seems to carry that same internal peace that gave her room to breathe. She might meet others, charming, bold, unpredictable, but charm fades. Boldness turns to bravado, and unpredictability becomes instability. And with each new interaction, each failed attempt to recreate what was, your presence grows more vivid in her absence. Because here's the truth. What she now notices in others is shaped entirely by what she once experienced in you. Your boundaries taught her where her own were missing. Your stillness showed her how much noise she allowed into her life. Your clarity cast light on the parts of her that thrived in your reflection. And even if she never says it aloud, she's changed, shaped by the relationship. That's the paradox of real masculinity. It doesn't imprint by force. It leaves a legacy through consistency, patience, and presence. Your value was not in your demands, but in your discipline, not in how loudly you loved, but in how deeply you saw. And when that depth is gone, it stings, quietly, repeatedly. Sometimes, when she's least expecting it, she hears your voice in her head when she's about to do something impulsive. The calm way you questioned her decisions, not to control, but to clarify. She feels your absence when life overwhelms her, when she realizes she no longer has someone who could ground her without needing to fix her. And in time, that absence becomes undeniable. She may never message you. She may never say the words. But rest assured, your impact lingers. It shapes her choices, her standards, even her regrets. And if she's on a path of growth, it will serve her. If not, it will haunt her. But either way, your energy remains. This is why Stoics do not chase legacy through loud gestures. They live with such presence that their departure becomes a message. And in doing so, they are remembered, not as idealized versions, but as a rare moment of alignment between two souls, where one stood firm even when the other faltered. If you have ever watched someone carry your absence like a weight, not because of manipulation but because of the man you chose to be, then you know this feeling. Tell us below what kind of impact you believe you left behind. Not to boast, but to honor what it means to show up fully and walk away with dignity. Chapter 9. Move on without looking back. There is a moment, and you will know it when it comes, when the weight of the past no longer asks to be carried. Not because it vanishes, not because it becomes irrelevant, but because you have grown strong enough to set it down gently and walk away. This is not a walk of bitterness. It is not the storming out of someone who needed revenge. It is the quiet, powerful exit of a man who has made peace with what cannot be controlled. To move on without looking back is not a heartless act. It is in many ways the most compassionate choice you can make. Because in doing so, you stop feeding illusions, hers and yours. You stop waiting for closure from someone who may not even be capable of giving it. You stop allowing the past to hold real estate in a mind that deserves to be free. You see, longing can become an identity if we're not careful. We wrap ourselves in memory, in the what-ifs, in the hope that maybe someday she will realize, she will return, she will apologize, and that hope becomes a slow poison, numbing your growth, delaying your healing. But a Stoic knows what is outside of your control is not yours to pursue. She had her chance. Many chances, perhaps. And even if she returns, even if her eyes carry the weight of realization, even if her voice trembles with the words you once longed to hear, you are no longer the same man who waited. You are not standing still at the gates of yesterday, hoping to be let back in. You have built a new life, quietly, steadily, stone by stone. And maybe she sees it now. Maybe your growth has reached her ears. Maybe the life she once imagined you'd never reach without her is the very life she now admires from a distance. That's the irony. Sometimes people only understand your value when they can no longer benefit from it. But that is not your concern anymore. You do not look back to see if she's watching. You do not craft your days as a message to her. You live for the sake of the life you are shaping. And if she watches, let her. But don't turn around. The past is not your direction. When you truly let go, your energy returns to you. You begin to see clearly again. You laugh differently. You walk lighter. You connect with new people not from lack, but from overflow. Your conversations no longer carry echoes of her name. Your silence no longer aches, it calms. And the world opens up. This is not erasure. You are not pretending she never mattered. You are simply no longer allowing a closed door to dictate your direction. You're no longer the man who waits. You are the man who walks forward into a life shaped by choice, not by chance. And perhaps one day you'll hear her name again. Perhaps someone will say she still speaks of you, that she still thinks of the way you made her feel, that she regrets not knowing what she had. But by then, it won't move you. Not out of cruelty, but because you've already grieved. You've already healed. You've already gone. If you've ever had to walk away, not in anger, but in peace, and never turned back, leave your reflection below. Your journey may help someone else begin theirs. Conclusion. She feels the void more than you know. Not always at once, not always out loud, but the weight of your absence lives quietly in the background of her life. And what once seemed ordinary, your presence, your words, your steadiness, now shines in memory with a clarity that hindsight always brings. But this isn't her story anymore. This is yours. And the story of a Stoic man is not about being chosen. It is about choosing. Choosing stillness over reaction. Choosing growth over validation. Choosing to love deeply. And when necessary, to let go completely. You didn't walk away to hurt her. You walked away to heal you. And maybe, just maybe, in doing so, you showed her more love than all the words you ever spoke. If something in this journey resonated, if you felt this echo, lived this silence, or found yourself standing at the crossroads of memory and self-respect, then the everlasting Stoic is your home. Subscribe, join the path. This channel is here for those who move forward with grace, who rise in the aftermath, who live their worth even when unseen. And if you feel called to, leave a comment below. Tell me, what's the moment you knew it was time to walk away? Because your silence, it echoes too.